The Dolphins have released Tyreek Hill. Where might he end up? We'll talk about it right now on FFT Express. What's up, everyone? Adam Azer and Jamey Eisenberg here talking about Tyreek Hill. So, as Jamey mentioned on our full-length show, he's a free agent for the first time in his career. We're going to give you 5 destinations that would work for Tyreek Hill. Let's go one by one here, Jamey. Kick it off.
I think the most obvious one that you're going to hear is Kansas City, going back to the Chiefs and being reunited with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and hopefully Travis Kelce again. I don't necessarily love that for him. I think it's great for Mahomes and the Chiefs, but you are talking about when he left, he was clearly the featured wide receiver and maybe even the featured option, even though Kelce was still in his prime. Now you're coming back to still Kelce there as of now. Obviously, Rashee Rice has established himself as the number one receiver. Xavier Worthy entering his third year. We know he's been a little bit of a bust, but still part of the process. And we'll see what they do in terms of the rest of the receiving core. I believe Marquise Brown and Tyquan Thornton are free agents. Not that should matter, but we are not talking about Tyreek Hill stepping into the featured role. However, he could still be great, even at 32, even coming off a knee injury in a system that clearly allowed him to dominate. So wouldn't be awful for him, but not my favorite spot.
I think the question with Tyreek Hill is what kind of player is he going to be? He has morphed, later in his career. He's not the deep threat that he once was. Now, forget about the injury just for a second, just what we've seen on paper. I believe that he hasn't been the deep threat that he once was because of Tua, not because of him.
Yep.
And, and just being hampered by the wrist injury a couple of years ago and not really being himself. So I feel like if he's one of the fastest guys we've ever seen in the NFL, basically. I feel like if you weren't coming off a torn ACL and a dislocated knee or a broken knee, whatever the heck it was, I think he'd still have speed to burn and could get deep. But if he's not that guy, well, Rashee Rice is already doing all of the underneath stuff. Travis Kelce's there. So, yeah, I don't know. It might not be a great fit. All right, give me another team.
I would love to hear Buffalo be in the mix for Tyreek simply because of the need that they have in attaching him to one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. And we saw what Josh Allen was when he had a premier playmaker because Stephon Diggs was in his prime when he went to Buffalo. And that helped Josh Allen perform amazing feats for fantasy. Not that he's been bad without Stephon Diggs, but as you've noted time and time again, that he's been better when he had a player like that. So they're going to be in on almost every wide receiver, my guess, in terms of free agency and potential trades. So you'll hear Alec Pierce, you'll hear George Pickens, you'll hear Mike Evans, you'll hear, any of these guys that have the chance to test the market. And you'll certainly hear A.J. Brown and anybody else that might be trade options. So I think Tyreek Hill, as of now, if he goes to Buffalo, that would be my favorite spot, barring anybody else going there with him.
Yeah, probably our favorite spot for any potentially great wide receiver. All right, not Miami, Kansas City, Buffalo. Who else?
I think Baltimore will be in the mix. Again, looking at a team that could add more playmakers. And, Dave talked about this, chasing a ring. Obviously, Baltimore is in that mix every year with Lamar Jackson. Coaching change now, puts a little bit different focus on it because we still expect the Ravens to be in the mix because of Jackson, because of that defense and Derrick Henry, et cetera. They have one good wide receiver who has the chance to be great. I think if he was maybe featured a little bit more, I don't know if this is the best fantasy destination for Tyreek Hill, but my guess is that, Lamar Jackson will probably put a little bit of a recruitment plan together and maybe want to get somebody like him to join that offense. And it'd be fun to see, it'd be fun to see Lamar Jackson, who we know can throw the ball down the field with great success. That's a team that obviously could use another wide receiver because they tried with DeAndre Hopkins last year. We know Rashad Bateman's been a little bit of a failure. And they're most likely letting a playmaker out the door in Isaiah Likely. At least that's the expectation after signing Mark Andrews. So I could see Baltimore being in the mix and, again, attaching him to a good quarterback. Hopefully he has a Devontae Adams-like, season where, touchdowns probably carry him a little bit more than everything else. But we know that could be the case in a Ravens offense.
Please not Baltimore from a fantasy perspective. I don't want.
Well, again, it's a different Baltimore, so. Yeah. Maybe not the most ideal spot from a target perspective and pass volume perspective, but things may change. Jesse Minter, even though he's a defensive guy, may allow Lamar Jackson to be Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, well, look, mobile quarterbacks just typically don't throw as much because they're more likely to scramble, but that's not always the case. Kyler Murray threw a lot. Jaden Daniels threw a lot in his rookie year down the stretch anyway. But I really don't want anything to hinder Zay Flowers. It seems like all systems go for Zay Flowers. All right, we're going to take a break and give you 2 more destinations for Tyreek Hill. We'll be right back. So far, we've got Kansas City, Buffalo, Baltimore. Not in order, by the way. Buffalo's our favorite. Give me another team that you could see Tyreek Hill ending up on.
Washington. Again, Jane Daniels, guy that needs pass catchers in a bad way. And I know Terry McLaurin is not exactly young, but he's still their best option. And as you talked about on the full-length episode, David Blau saying that they're going to try and get him 10 targets per game. Well, who else do they have at this point? You're most likely without Zach Ertz. If he does return, he's coming off a pretty significant injury. Deebo Samuel's a free agent, most likely gone. Luke McCaffrey's coming off an injury. This is just a very depleted receiving core. And so does he like the idea of going to be with one of the young quarterbacks who are on the rise and 2 years removed from a playoff run when he was a successful quarterback in his rookie campaign? So I can see that as a destination. I don't know what their cap situation is, but, adding to that receiving core. Washington.
Yeah. Top 5, 5th most cap space.
So there's the potential for money and being, associated with a great quarterback. And so while he may not be the number 1 pass catcher there, if you're viewing Terry McLaurin in that way, I think those two can coexist and have a pretty good partnership.
All right. Last one. I got some teams I'll throw out as well, but give me your one more, last one.
So I'm going to go wild card here and say that George Pickens leaves the Cowboys and he goes to Dallas and, joins the premier team in terms of marketing and all those things. And, pairs up with CeeDee Lamb and tries to make a run there with Dak Prescott. Now, again, probably not our favorite destination just because of CeeDee Lamb being there and commanding targets. But, for a guy that likes the spotlight on him a little bit, for a team that definitely has it, hopefully that could be a good situation, pairing those two guys together and see how that works out. I would like it fantasy-wise, just in terms of what we saw from Pickens last year. I think Tyreek could still be pretty good as a number 2.
I think the Patriots are always going to be discussed whenever a wide receiver is available. They've got a decent amount of cap space. They need a wide receiver. The Titans and the Raiders have the most cap space in the NFL. Wouldn't mind seeing him go. I mean, I wouldn't love that, but at least he can step into big targets at those spots. All right, here we go. I got a team. It feels like their moment may have passed. They're sick of it, right? They need to make a statement. Hey, we're not going to let our division, our conference get away from us here. It's our last stand. The San Francisco 49ers, they get Tyreek Hill, which would be weird, right? They haven't had that true alpha wide receiver. They've turned guys into that, but Tyreek Hill on that team would be interesting to me. I feel like they could make any wide receiver work with their system. If he still has that yak ability, it would be awesome. So I'm gonna hope for the 49ers as a sneaky one there.
Wouldn't shock me. I was also thinking in the division, the chasing a ring. Seattle has a need for a second wide receiver. Rashid Shaheed's a free agent. Cooper Kupp's 33. But yeah, San Francisco, definite need, and so I think anytime you're looking for landing spots for these guys, what matters most? Because San Francisco will be in the playoff mix. You assume. Look what they just did. With a lot of patchwork, replacing injuries and making a run. They definitely need the help there. So I thought you were actually going to go Pittsburgh the way you were describing it. With what they have also. But I don't know if I could see Tyreek there without the established quarterback. I think he's going to end up, probably going. If I had to prioritize his needs, I would say it's probably money, quarterback, team success.
I don't know about money. He really may not be a need for him at this point. I mean, he's still getting paid by the Dolphins, right? At this point, if I'm him, I'm just chasing the ring, Derek Carr style. I'll take the money. Okay, we'll talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today. Thanks a lot, everybody.